All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to Atlanta Inno's first Bytes with the Beat. I'm Erin Schilling, the technology reporter with Atlanta Inno and the Atlanta Business Chronicle, where I sort of cover all things innovation happening in the city. If you're not familiar with Atlanta Inno, we're part of a network of publications where we cover local innovation news in markets across the country. You can check us out on the Atlanta Business Chronicle site, or you could subscribe to our twice a week newsletter called The Beat and get innovation news straight into your inbox. This series, the Bytes with the Beat, is sort of modeled after that newsletter, and we're just here talking with local founders, investors, thought leaders about their stories and their companies and innovation happening in the city. And today we have Rob Forman here to talk a little bit about SalesLoft and how that company has grown over the past 8 or so years. So I appreciate you being here with us, Rob.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. And then if you just want to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and a little bit about what you do at SalesLoft.
Yeah. My name is Rob Forman and co-founder at SalesLoft. A little bit about myself. My parents bought me a computer. It was called a pre-computer 2000 when I was 8 years old, and it had this little cartridge that you could put in it that was the basic programming language. And I turned it on and it just sat there and it blinked at me. And that was the beginning and the hook that really got me into technology and programming as a kid. Fell into a career in technology and enjoyed it. And along the way, I realized that I love moving fast and being close to the customer. And entrepreneurialism kind of drew me in, and I wanted to start a company. And so SalesLoft is the second company I've started.
Awesome. What do you do at SalesLoft?
So my role is the president and chief strategy officer, and I help us think about the future. And so what SalesLoft does, a little bit about SalesLoft, is that we help organizations make their sales reps more productive and generate more revenue. But we do it in a way that helps the seller do what humans do best, which is to be creative, connect with other individuals, and to solve problems. And so it's this balancing act of, we want to help salespeople, but we want to help companies create better customer experiences, because ultimately the customer doesn't care how scalable our sales process is. The customer cares about getting their problem solved. And so we focus on balancing that tension and bringing technology to bear on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, take me back to the first year of SalesLoft. How did you guys even sort of find this niche and find this problem that you were like, we need to solve this?
Yeah, so it probably started before SalesLoft. I started another company, Higher IQ, and we built a product. It was voice analysis in the call center space, and we got some early customers and traction, and we felt like we hit this ceiling where we were really struggling to create a repeatable sales process. And it really showed me how little I knew about sales. I told you how all my background's in technology, and so I thought, well, let's just, can somebody else just solve that problem for me? Can the sales guy just solve that problem, right? And what I learned was that there was a lot more that I needed to learn about sales. And so after I left that business, which was recently acquired, I set out to learn about sales. And my co-founder Kyle was going through a similar experience where he's a sales guy, has been a sales guy his whole life, and wanted to figure out how to build product and take it to market. And so we really connected over this idea of, how do we use technology to improve the lives of salespeople specifically, so that they can be better at the craft of sales. And in sales, there has been poor reputations from people who use sales in a negative way. But the most authentic version of sales is the idea that having somebody else help you solve a problem and understand your problems deeply enough that they can match it to the right solution. And so that's what we set out to do. And so in the early days, we actually didn't know exactly what we were going to build. And so we started watching what salespeople did. As an engineer, that was kind of my default. It was like, well, let's see what they do. And I was also had fresh eyes to sales. And I realized that they did some of these tasks over and over and over, and they used this thing called a CRM, but it didn't really help them. They kind of just put the data in there, and it was important for the business. It was important for the executives so they could know what was going on in sales, but it wasn't necessarily helping the individual salespeople. And that's what we really wanted to do. And so we built a number of products. Several of them didn't work. The one that started working was built by an intern. And so I was working on this core product, which I thought was going to be the next greatest thing. And he asked me for help on something. And so we opened up the logs, and there was just so much usage. And so we pivoted and started working on that. And that became our first product called Prospector, which we ran for a couple of years. And that led us to what is now our flagship product, which is Cadence. Because what we saw is that salespeople would take lists of leads, but then the best salespeople would follow a methodical cadence of a multi-channel approach to reaching out to individuals. And so we started building a system for that.
That's awesome. I love that an intern was sort of the first step to
the hero.
Yeah, right. And I think that's indicative of a lot of startups, right? Like just sort of the recent college grad or the college dropout or whatever, like, where innovation is really coming from.
Right. Yeah. And I love that because it means you never know where the next good idea is going to come from. And that's the other lesson that I had learned and Kyle and I really united on was when we were starting SalesLoft, was that I didn't do a good job in the past of putting organizational health or values at the center of what I was doing. And when we started SalesLoft, we said, we want to do that from day one. What we're going to do, we're going to solve problems for salespeople with technology. Without a doubt, that's clearly what we're going to do. And that's what has generated the growth and pays the bills. But how we're going to do it, we're going to do it in a way which is healthy and which we like going to work. And I got to the point where, and there were teams that I worked on, I didn't love going to work. And many times it wasn't about the work, it was about the environment around us. And so we set out to include core values like humility in the ethos of the company, so that when an intern has an idea or is getting great traction, that there's a team-oriented rally around it, and there's not all of the infighting and politics that are unfortunately so common.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in the startup sort of community tell me that that's why they like working at companies like SalesLoft. They have this sort of mobility, they have a voice within the company, and they have like a culture where, no idea is a bad idea, right? Like if you're looking at innovation, that's the whole point, is new ideas. So
yeah, it really takes two things. It takes innovation, and then it takes a team to execute on it. It's an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And the whole idea is that if we're going to build something special, then we need to do it as a team. And so the question we ask ourselves is, what does a healthy team dynamic look like? How do we cultivate it? And what types of people do well in that environment? And that's where our values came from, and the value of team over self came from. I had a mentor who was a UPS executive who talked about in the early days of UPS how it's the order is company, team, self. Like keep it that order. If you get it out of order, that's bad for your career. And he really instilled that into me, and I brought that with me into SalesLoft, and it's really helped us.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about sort of the challenges that you guys faced in like the very early days of the company, and then how you overcame them.
Yeah, I guess if I'm thinking about the audience, your audience is maybe people who are thinking about doing it, or who are early in their journey, and they're looking at SalesLoft saying, how do I get from here to there, right? Like I think we had talked before we started recording of the misconceptions of the 10-year overnight success. And so what I would say is that we hit tons of problems, constantly had problems. I remember we were going to the Atlanta Aquarium because we had won Best Place to Work. And so it's like highest high. And then I'm on the phone with an unhappy customer, and it's like lowest low. And so it is a journey with highs and lows. And so I guess what I would say is that you're going to hit them. And what helped us the most was seeing them as opportunities, seeing them as, this is just the next thing we need to knock down. And when we figure it out, then we will be closer to the next problem that we need to knock down. And I know I initially had this idea of like, well, if we really have the right thing for the right market, if we have market fit, then maybe it'll be easy. And like, it's just not easy. So I mean, we had two products that didn't work till the intern one, right? That product we ended up discontinuing a couple of years in because we really saw the market somewhere else. So we had to do this huge pivot. We had staff that didn't work out, and we had to figure out what does it mean to manage people out of the business in a way that it's done with dignity and respect, yet we are still guarding this idea of culture within our business. We had to figure out how to build a leadership team. We had to figure out how to build cohesion on the leadership team. We had to figure out role clarity of who does what and when, and how to not step on each other's toes. And we figure out how to set goals, and it's just endless. And so if anyone is running into similar challenges, it's just part of the journey.
Yeah, how it is. It's just like normal route for a startup, I guess.
Yeah.
What are, like, now that you guys have grown so much, that you're such a big company at this point, like, what are the new challenges that you're facing? You have your products, you have your leadership team and stuff like that. Like, what are some of the next obstacles that you have to tackle?
Yeah, what's interesting is that the more you succeed and the more it works, you just get different challenges. So one of the challenges is the challenge of choices. It's the paradox of success, which is that the more you succeed, then the more options you have. And if you try to take all of the options, then you'll dilute your impact. And so in the early days, the goal is just to not die, right? It's like, we need to build this, and we need to get to customers. And I remember we were at Atlanta Tech Village, and we would finish developing something. We would hit, go to publish it out into, we were, run everything on Amazon. And so publish it out into the cloud. And we literally then walk down the hallway and say, hey guys, hey, can you test it? We would talk to people who were customers and could test it right there in Atlanta Tech Village. And so, which was a blast. But then it was really clear what we needed to do. The bigger we get, I think it's harder to do that. And so we have to spend more time to make sure we understand what our customers need, what the market needs, where the market is going, and having a point of view and a hypothesis on where the market is going, and then beginning to make investments ahead of that, so that by the time the market starts to mature, that we're there to reap the benefits of it. So it's less reactive and more proactive. And I'd say that's part of, the next stage of growth. The other piece is scaling. Organizational health has its own, unique challenges. I remember the first time we hit, it's probably like 30 people. The first time we couldn't like all fit into stand-up kind of thing, we started to grow. We break apart into rooms and departments, which is all very normal, but very traumatic when you're used to all being in the same room together. And people would ask, like, well, how do we not lose our culture? Because we knew we had something special. And then when we got to 50 people, same question, and 75 people. I remember Dunbar's number, like 150 people, and then 300 people, and we're almost to 600 now. And so solving that is something we did well, but it's something we have to continue to do, especially through something like the pandemic. And the way we solved it was realizing that while Kyle and I, as co-founders and the exec team, set example for what it means to live the values and the culture, it's actually up to each and every individual. So I talk to every new hire about how they take the culture to the edges of the organization. And I started using an example years ago, but it became really eerie and really easy to understand through the pandemic. I use the example of vaccinations. And I'll tell a story of, like, if a community stops getting vaccinated, then kind of what happens there. And so, like, there was this outbreak of smallpox in Minneapolis. And I said, when some people stop getting vaccinated, for a while, nothing bad happens because they have the herd immunity around them. Yeah. And now everybody knows what herd immunity is, but back then people didn't. But I say, so it kind of protects us. And then a couple more people don't, and then a couple more, and then all at once, the virus rips through a community, and and people have died. And I said, that's what culture is like. If you don't do anything to understand our culture and our values, and if you don't do anything to advance it, then after a while, nothing bad will happen, and nothing bad will happen, and then nothing bad. And all at once, it'll seem like the good people left, and and dysfunction and politics tears through the organization, and people look around and go, why do I even work here? And I should go work somewhere else. And so what I do is I commission everyone to be vaccinated, and not in the current sense, but in this sense of like, what are you doing to understand the values and the organizational health? And so like team over self is one of our values. What is team over self to an engineer? What is team over self to a salesperson or to a support person? Like those jobs are very different, but if you're working to translate it into your corner of the business, then that allows us to scale. And so then as we grow now, we're facing the challenge of we had a lot of people in the office, in the Atlanta office, over 300 people. And so now a lot of them are working remotely, super productive. I mean, the pandemic sort of accelerated all of that digital transformation. And so what does it look like to cultivate that same sense of connection, but to do it in this hybrid workforce? And so one of the things we're experimenting with, and we just did it last week actually, is this idea of Sync Week, which is a week that we bring a bunch of people together where we're doing planning every quarter. So it's like the 10th week of the quarter. We can do planning for the next quarter, but we're not interrupting the end of quarter. And it's just so fun. We were in the office, we had dinners, we did pizza parties. It was just so good to see everyone. Many of them I hadn't seen in over a year since the pandemic first began. Yeah, so it was crazy.
Yeah, were your employees like, Rob, were you trying to tell us something with this vaccine?
Yeah, I know exactly. Like looking out ahead, and I know it was pretty eerie.
So tell me a little bit, like, what does remote work or hybrid work mean for SalesLoft? Like, how are you guys sort of balancing people working from home versus people coming into the office and all of that?
Yeah, I remember in the early days, we kind of happened upon this 3-word policy that fixes a lot of things. And we were like, use good judgment. You know, should we do this or should we do that? And it's like, how about we let people decide and use good judgment, because we hire professionals and let's just empower them to do that. So through the pandemic, we saw not only were we didn't drop in productivity, but we actually saw an increase in productivity. People were very productive. Our business accelerated. And some of that is due to what the pandemic did to other businesses. It forced them all to be remote. And so our software helps teams who are remote to execute better and to coordinate better, and to everything that the salespeople are doing, it tees them up and it puts it all into the CRM. And so there's more visibility within the organization. So as more and more teams move to digital sales, it helped us accelerate. But as we looked at it, we said, well, what does it mean for us? And so we really broke it down into 3 buckets. Who's going to be, going forward fully home, and we kind of had some definitions of it. Who's going to be flex, which we're defining as 2 days a week in the office, and then who's going to be in the office, which is 3 to 5 days a week. And so we just really put it to our team to say, where do you think, what works best for you? Knowing that there's an element of what makes SalesLoft special of this idea of connection. So with that in mind, what do you want to be? And so we got the survey results back, and we're tailoring our perks, because we've always had tons of fun perks, but rather than one set of perks for everyone, we're tailoring the perks to the different groups. And just like benefits where you can change them, once a year on life events, we just make it so if you want to change this, if you started as home and you want to change to flex, or you started as office, you want to move to home, then like that's good with me.
Yeah, I think the pandemic really kind of created this interesting experiment and kind of what we've been talking about, like office culture or sort of employee-employer trust, because I think a lot of companies have seen the same sort of story of, our employees are working from home and productivity has increased, we're hiring professionals, we're hiring people who are good culture fits, why shouldn't we trust them to make their own schedules, sort of work on their own time and know that they're still doing, great work for SalesLoft or whoever.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's an amazing trend. And I think what is sometimes missed though is the need for connection. And that's where this idea of like setting when we do this thing called Coffee with the Lofty. It was started by one of our salespeople years ago, and he sent out this email. He said, "I eat lunch out, every day. So every Friday, I'm going to buy one person lunch, and here's a sign up list." And it was like every Friday for the rest of the year. And by the time I opened the list, like all the Fridays had been filled in. It's like the way to get to know people is just buy them lunch.
Yeah.
And so it started this thing within the company where we have this system that automatically pairs us up for coffee. And so I meet with with new people all the time. And so I asked them, number one, how's it going? And number two, how are you feeling about, culture and connection? And the encouraging thing was that they, even when we couldn't be in the office at all, they said they felt the culture was so alive. And I asked them what they meant by that. And they really broke it down to, I feel like people are trying to help me. Like when I have questions that they want to help me, get into my job and get going. And that sort of team over selfness, it really makes me feel excited. And it makes me feel that I'm going to succeed at my job, because that's what we all want to do. We want to all come in and do a great job. Mm-hmm. But then also, as I talk to them, it is this like, I don't want to be in the office every day, but I do want to see people face to face and more than two dimensions, and get to know them because there's just that deeper longing. And so how do we as companies cultivate that and sort of create a rhythm around it where the people who want to, and then they can kind of jump into that.
Yeah, I think that's like an interesting idea too, of we used technology this past year to collaborate because we had to, right? Like we're literally not together. We have to be on Zoom or whatever. And then, but also what you were saying, kind of using technology to facilitate even more collaborations in person, like how can we make sure that we have that kind of valuable one-on-one connection within the office that isn't just because I walk past your desk. So I think that's interesting as sort of a tool to help with that hybrid model.
Yeah, because what if we don't connect, and some people love working remotely, and I'll say that there's a percentage of people who, and I worked remotely for 5 years when I worked for Verizon years ago. And some people love it, and that is kind of how they want to do it. But for many people, when they're remote, they start to feel more disconnected. And then they start to feel kind of just like a hired gun. And then they start to feel like, well, what else is out there? Maybe I'll go look at other things. And what I know is, regardless of where we work and who we work for, something is hardwired in us that we want to take the gifts and talents that we've been given and use them to accomplish something bigger than ourselves. The key is that we want to do something bigger than ourselves. And it's hard to do that when you're by yourself. And so that's, I think, the responsibility of organizations, which is how do we give people something to plug into that's bigger than themselves? And when they do that, it's motivation to strive our most, like it creates the growth that stimulates people. I don't always like doing hard things, but when I've looked back on my career on what has produced the most growth and learning and opportunity, it's often suffering, meaning like working through hard things. We can have a nice name for it, but suffering is the more accurate name.
Yeah. And I think, that's interesting, because even like the collaboration that you were talking about, that sort of with the intern that spurred, product development at SalesLoft, like that is sort of the necessary team, interactions that you need for innovation, for growth, for kind of building.
We need to bounce off of each other and as we pursue something bigger than any one of us.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, what's sort of next? Like SalesLoft, obviously we've been talking about you guys' growth. You surpassed the $1 billion valuation earlier this year. What are the next goals and what's next for the company?
Yeah. So we continue to focus on the sales professional and bringing the full suite of products that they need to be productive. We have something called the revenue lane, which is kind of anyone who works on opportunities or people who are directly involved in the revenue lane. And so, we're continuing to expand our three product lines, both increasing the quality and the depth of them, as well as launching new products in the coming year. And so excited for more to come there. And then there is continued market expansion. So we've had great progress from our team in Europe. They've been going gangbusters, and so we're making additional investments there. We have investments into our new financial services vertical, which has been going well, and we're investing there. And so if you look at our website, I think there's over 100 openings, and so we continue to hire and add to the team. And it's a really big market. Sometimes people ask, because SalesLoft is so known for values and organizational health, it's like, is that what created all the growth? And I want to be clear, like, no, that's what keeps the wheels on the bus and it makes it fun to work somewhere. What creates growth is the size of the market. And so what I'm most excited about the future is that the market was already large. And with the pandemic and the acceleration of digital sales, the market is massive. And so we continue to go after it and stick to our knitting and hire great people and build great products and sell them to great customers and support them. So, it's a lot of just keep doing the next right thing. And when I think about entrepreneurs who are early in their journey, there's no magic bullet to it. Like every success layers on the previous success, and it layers and it layers and it layers, and just keep doing the next right thing that the business needs.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rob. I think we're coming up on time, but I really appreciate you sort of giving us a look at SalesLoft and the start and a little bit about the culture that you guys have built. This has been great.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks, Erin.
Thanks.